The drums of a peaceful community that was popularly known for its good hospitality and kindness began before sunset. This time it was deep and scarcely rhythmic, but definitely loud and informative. Everyone heard the drums, and they knew that something was happening in the village. But what exactly was happening? The hearts of men was curious. Alive. Alive. Voices were heard to be coming from one particular direction. It was the only direction that passes through the forest. The villagers ran in one direction like a controlled wave of excitement. Some rolled across the red earth of the village of Umuorie, like a heartbeat, calling every villager to the square, as they all approach in one disgruntled group. Women tied their wrappers tighter for safety, children ran barefooted with laughter and excitement but unaware of the implication of what was before them. And men abandoned their evening leisure hangout with friends, roasted bush meats and palm wine to follow the sound. Do you know that most men had the feelings that something terrible has just manifested in their village? Were they wrong? Could the excitement of the people be a sign of good news? Something extraordinary had happened. Something impossible that had never been heard of, nor happened before. She is back, some of them shouted in excitement, jumping and running around. She has returned. At the edge of the village path, where the forest loomed like a silent watcher, a figure had emerged slowly through the golden haze of evening dust. It was Cheeserar. And she was alive. Her steps were calm, gentle and measured as she walked gracefully. Her beauty had not faded, but seemed to have brightened more. If anything was to be observed, it had deepened significantly, and more attractive. The coral beads around her neck glowed faintly against her skin, and her eyes held a strange stillness. The villagers erupted in joy, but some reasonable minds were reluctantly joyful, but curious. Cheeserar! Cheeserar! They rushed toward her, surrounding her, touching her arms, her face, as though afraid she might vanish again, and they obviously didn't want that to happen because everyone loved Cheeserar. But in the midst of the celebration, one person did not move with excitement, but gripped with fear and uncertainty. Chioma, her mother. Her lips trembling, her eyes wide with something no one else seemed to feel. Fear. Because 3 days ago, she had watched them lower her daughter into the ground. Before the forest took her, Cheeserar had been everything a village could love. She was not just beautiful, though her beauty was spoken of in nearby villages, but her spirit was gentle in a way that drew people in. She greeted elders with both knees bent respectfully. She shared a heartwarming love among everyone equally. She laughed easily, and was never known to express any form of negative energy. And she had a way of making others feel seen. They say some children are born with light, the elders would whisper with references to Cheeserar. That girl carries it in great quantity. Even her father, a quiet man hardened by years of farming, softened around her and treasured her so much. But light, in a world like theirs, was never left alone without being hunted by dark forces, physically and spiritually. But how did she got into her early grave, and most importantly, how did she come back alive? Who came back? It was a simple afternoon when everything in the village seemed normal. The kind that passes without any significant memory. The sun hung lazily above the tall trees in the village, and the air carried the scent of dust and roasting cassava, which was the predominant women activities in the village. Cheeserar picked up her clay pot and told her mother she was going to fetch water from the stream. "I won't be long," she said with a smile. Her mother nodded with gladness because they needed the water in the house, and her lovely daughter felt the need to get some. She watched her daughter walk away and whispered words of blessings upon her. But her words was meant for her own ears alone. That was the last normal moment she saw her daughter alive. Because Cheeserar never returned home from the stream. At first, there was no panic because it was assumed that she must be hanging out with friends. Everyone felt confident that she will come. But when night fell, and the crickets began their chorus in the dark, unease settled like a shadow over the compound. By midnight, the men had gathered in the compound, because they all cared, and with concern for Cheeserar. Torches and lanterns were lit in the hands of men. Her disappearance was new to everyone because her character and attitude to everyone was unquestionable without doubt. Her name was called and shouted across the village and bushes around. Cheeserar! Cheeserar! Their voices echoed into the forest, swallowed by darkness. The search lasted until dawn, but nothing good came as a result. Not even a footprint. With eagerness and agility on the second day, they found her at the edge of the forbidden forest. Her body lay still, with her wrapper untouched, and her skin unmarked. But her eyes. Her eyes were open but visionless, as no sign of breathing could be noticed by anyone. The eyes were wide open. Frozen in terror. Most often from the terror of the last thing that she saw. It was as though she had seen something no human should ever witness, or she was viciously threatened. Her mother collapsed before reaching her, when the body was brought home, and the loss of Cheeserar was a big loss to the village. The village fell silent. But now that Cheeserar had come back alive again, is it that she was never dead in the first place? If so, how did she exhume herself from the grave? Stay tuned and find out. In accordance with the laws and tradition in Umuorie, the dead are buried quickly. And it must be done before the sun sets. Because it was believed that the night belongs to things that should never meet the living. Consequently, Cheeserar was wrapped in white cloth, while her mother wailed helplessly and tirelessly, until her voice cracked. Her father stood still in deep thought. Very deep thought, while the villagers proceeded with the burial, and his eyes were empty. They eventually lowered her body into the ground, and with that, the light of Umuorie was buried in sadness. Everyone loved Cheeserar. 3 days later, while normalcy was still finding it hard to reclaim its place in the sad hearts of the villagers of Umuorie, the drums began suddenly. Provoking curiosity by an entire village what was still mourning in bitterness of the darkness that had taken away their light. Their joy. And that same light, Cheeserar, was seen walking back into the village. Alive. Everyone rejoiced, or at least, most people rejoiced because they were still not ready to lose Cheeserar yet. But Chioma, her mother, did not rejoice with them. She watched Cheeserar closely while her mind struggled with indifferent feelings. Acceptance struggled against warning in her mind, while joy struggled with doubt in her mind. Cheeserar hugged her passionately with a loving smile, but her body felt cold. Her smile lingered too long, and her eyes did not soften peacefully. The whole celebration eventually came to an end and everyone had a story to tell. Cheeserar was back and alive again, but did she return with supernatural powers from the gods, for helping the villagers? That night, Chioma did not sleep. And neither did Cheeserar, her daughter. At midnight, Chioma stepped outside and watched Cheeserar standing in the compound, facing the direction of the forest. She stood at a spot for long without moving nor making any form of motion. Not even breathing visibly. And when her mother was tired of watching, she called out. "Mwam," she whispered, and Cheeserar slowly turned and faced her. Then she smiled at her mother, and walked over to her. But maybe, just maybe, that was just the beginning. Strange things began to happen in the village, that had never been known to happen in the past. Goats died without wounds or sickness. Children cried loudly with fear in their sleep. One day, a child insisted with confidence that she saw Cheeserar. "She was in my room," the child said. "She was watching me but did not do anything." The elders grew uneasy, wondering what was before them. But no one dared speak the truth that bothered in their minds because the person in question was too good, or known to be too good to be accused of ill-doing. But one man who has had enough was an exception. That is not the girl we buried. This is not the seer that we all knew before she died. Then one evening, like an answer to the prayers in the hearts of men, women and children in the village, Mama Ezina came uninvited. She walked into the village like someone who already knew what she would find. When she saw seer, her face darkened. "Who followed you back to this village?" she asked. Seer smiled and remained unshaken, and said nothing. But Mama Ezina walked away to the relevant people and they made the necessary arrangement. That night, the ritual began. Fire was burned at the center of the village square, and the wind rose unnaturally. The flames turned blue and the villagers gasped in fear. Suddenly, seer screamed in pains, and shouted for help. Everyone was warned not to touch her, nor go near her. Then, the voice that came from seer was not hers. It was deep and ancient. Hungry. She was empty, the strange voice said. So I took her body, and I came. The village trembled. You called me, the spirit continued, and then, it pointed, at seer's aunt. Ngozi. And Ngozi's face drained of color. She was seer's closest auntie. The truth spilled in detail and it was all jealousy and bitterness. Ngozi had taken a secret trip to the forest, to hurt seer or take her life completely as a sacrifice for her to get rich. She bargained with the deadly dark forces of the evil forest. One life, in exchange for wealth. And seer was a convenient option, in exchange for wealth. Ngozi sacrificed seer's life to have money and be wealthy. And when the spirit was done talking, Mama Ezina insisted that the body must be destroyed. Chioma fell to her knees. How do I kill my child? Again, it was not easy for a woman to watch her child, or whatever came to her as her child, being killed. But then, that was not her child that she knew. The spirit laughed. The sky darkened and chaos erupted. Then, seer looked at her mother, and for a brief moment, she was herself again. A ball of tear fell to the ground. Mama. Please. The flames rose higher again, and the screams echoed into the darkness of the night. And then creepy silence followed with everyone not trying to hide their fears. Now, all I can say next in this. By morning, nothing remained in the village's square, except ashes, and a warning. In Umuorie, they say, when the dead return, do not celebrate too quickly. Because some returns are not miracles. They are messages.